Welcome to the worldwide headquarters and studios of All Duke Sports Talk, where all Duquesne sports fans can unabashedly and fully indulge in everything Duquesne University sports. So, without further ado, let's get to it. And let's go Dukes.
Dukes Nation, welcome back to your favorite podcast, YouTube show. It's All Dukes Sports Talk. Once again, I am Bob Healy III, joined by Nick Frost and Rudy Longarini. And our guest this week is none other than the famous, some may say infamous, Zac Weiss from Pittsburgh Sports Now and a number of other places you may have read Zac's work. Zac has been a Duquesne Dukes reporter for men's and women's hoops, probably most notably, but also men's and women's soccer, football. I mean, you name it. He's covered almost every sport Duquesne has had till now. Zac, if I'm not mistaken, I think you recently covered your 800th Duquesne athletics related event. Is that true?
So we're confirming that I officially got my Duquesne AARP card. Is that what we're saying, Bob?
No, it's an honorary degree. You'll get an honorary degree one day. I'm certain of it.
So Paul Hightower will turn the lights off an hour later for me. Is that how this is going to go?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, in 10 years, I'll be running the place, of course, and I'll just confer a degree. That's just how it's going to go. And
Okay.
Hightower as well, but him first.
Okay.
Hey, speaking of Paul Hightower, you know, we had a nice debate last week about, actually the last couple of weeks, didn't we, about like potential Dukes Hall of Famers, and I keep throwing out names of broadcasters and people like that. But Zac, you and I have spoken before off this podcast about because we see each other. Zac is a guest in some of my classes, and and I run into him in the press box, of course. That someone like a Paul Hightower, you know, is a very deserving candidate. He's the Duquesne mob boss. Is that what the Post Gazette had him as a couple years ago? Is that what that story was?
Something like that.
Yeah, he's the king of Duquesne sports. Paul Hightower, facilities and operations, gets a ton done. Nick, I know you know Paul.
Yeah, I was always impressed that he knew me, even when I was just a practice player. So he truly makes sure to know everything about Duquesne athletics.
Yeah, great dude. Radford grad. Paul has been with the athletics department since I was a student athlete there. When we run the NCAA tournament games, both at the arena, the big arena, but also all the practice space and locker room space at home at the Cooper, and before that the Palumbo Center. Paul has had so much to do with that. Hosting any of these events, even when Duquesne hosts some of these smaller divisional championships, sometimes we host like the D2 and 3 volleyball championships and things like that. And Paul Hightower is one of those guys that makes that happen. So shout out to Paul. And then one day, of course, we'll all be cheering on Zac Weiss as he gets honored, maybe as a media member. But let's get right to our itinerary. Men's basketball, guys, we're going to lead with them because it's been quite a turnaround. It started not all that long ago, really. After the 0-6 start, the Dukes men have been, I can't say red hot, but have been noticeably better. And the results have shown in the win column as well. If you missed Duquesne men's basketball's last game, the 85-81 overtime win in Pittsburgh against St. Joe's, as the great Mike Lang would say, shame on you for 6 weeks. That was an amazing game. It was just so much fun to watch. We've talked about how the women's team has been a wonderful team to watch in terms of entertainment value. This men's basketball team is turning out to also be a good bang for your buck. That game I was not at in person, but I got to watch on ESPN Plus. And we'll talk about ESPN Plus a little bit later in our show today. But 85-81 in overtime. David Dixon played hero, not only blocking shots at one end, but then hitting 3-pointers at the other. Kareem Rozier, 7 assists to 0 turnovers. Kareem now leads the Atlantic 10 in assist to turnover ratio.
Yeah.
He's third in all of Division One. So kudos to Kareem and the men's team. Zac, were you at that game in person? I believe you were. Am I mistaken?
My outfit was. I don't know if I was. No, I was there.
You were there. Well, give us your thoughts. I know you've written about the game, of course, and you've written a lot about the Kareem Rozier, David Dixon interactions. Your initial takeaways for our audience that might not have read any of your coverage.
I don't think this win happens without the Davidson loss, quite frankly. And the main reason why is Jakob Netjes. And of course, Duquesne was without Jakob for the Davidson game. Jakob made the trip, but it just wasn't able to go. Not for a lack of trying. He tried like heavens to get Drew Joyce to do the little call to the bullpen, put me in the game, coach, I'm ready to play. But that was just not the day. And Jakob went through pregame shoot around for the St. Joe's game, went through warmups, looked fine, but during the game, just something happened late first half where he went down in pain. He was taken into the back, and then eventually, before the halftime, was sent to the locker room and later joined his teammates on the bench. But not having Jakob out there, it's not about points and rebounds, it's about feel, and nobody on that team feels the game like Jakob Netjes does. And
I
not
agree.
having not
Oh.
having Jakob there was just fantastic. So really, when push comes to shove, and not fantastic, but it was fantastic to see how they responded. Excuse me. So to see them put the pieces together, they had to learn it on the fly against Davidson, but they had that knowledge of what worked and what didn't. And St. Joe's is a very, very difficult team. They've got multiple players that are going to play professionally, whether that's in the NBA or otherwise. And really, yes, Dave Dixon's instincts, especially his wherewithal, knowing his body position with 4 fouls to block, to draw charges, to make the game-winning 3. Just, of course, people will look at it as the David Dixon game, but Trey Dinkins crawled so Dave Dixon could walk, and just the ability for him to step back, and just the ability for the team to make the right plays. Eli Wilborn comes down with that huge rebound at the end when Joe's was the more physical team. By no means was this a perfect game for Duquesne, but I felt that Duquesne did a lot more things better, more consistently than St. Joseph's did, and wanted it more in the plays that mattered most, that defined the game. And that was enough to be the game. And you had some really, really good things. I think that Max Edwards, of course, he's been a very hot topic on this show, but I think they've kind of found that way to make him work with the minutes that he has. And yes, he was a little bit frustrated when he came off the first time during an extended talk with Drew Joyce, of course, but it was because he had just made a big 3. He had made a couple energy plays and 1 foul, and he felt it was a quick hook. But there's still a lot of figuring out, and there are going to be guys that aren't going to be happy all of the time, and that's not to slight Max. That's across the board. And when you have guys doing the right things consistently, like what Cam Crawford's doing, when you had a miscommunication in the first half between Jashawn Corbett and Trey Dinkins, in the second half, immediately there's a mistake, and the two immediately say, my bad, and move on to the next play. Those are winning moves. Those are winning things, and those are what you need to keep the identity. And those kinds of things and those continuity things that seem so small are what helps. I think on the inside, you see, oh, Matusz Wronski is missing shots, but what he's doing is creating length on the floor. He's being disruptive. He's an able-bodied defensively that maybe you don't have. There's a reason why he started that overtime period. And those are things that are maybe missed because people are frustrated that he's missing shots, but Duquesne's telling him to be aggressive, take those shots. And they've said the same thing to Jakob Netjes. And those aren't shots that kill you. Those are plays where guys are developing confidence, and that's what's needed to win in March. Confidence, togetherness, and continuity. And really, in the moments that mattered, that really was in spades and buckets throughout, and that was why that was a win.
I'm gonna go to Nick on his thoughts on the game as well. But Rudy, you are all kinds of pumped up over that win against St. Joe's. I want to let you jump in here.
Well, it was just Dixon. Everybody's making a big deal about Dixon hitting the shot, the 3-pointer, and overtime, and I'm thinking to myself, dude, he did that last year. He hit a number of times last year. He was pressured and hit. If I remember, a 3-pointer. Nobody's thinking if he's going to go to the next level, he's got to develop that part of his game. That's all there is to it. So if he's got hopes of turning pro and being good, then he's got to do that. And he just stepped into the situation. I think he's capable. I wasn't surprised that he hit it. Okay. So I just have to say that. As far as the rest of the game, man, I got to give it to Dinkins, man. let me tell you something. He was going to the rim this time, and he made some incredible shots. You know that I don't think even Clark would have made last year because they were the pump and cover on the other side of the rim. You know, Clark was more like a straight right to left, and if he beat anybody, you know, I have a saying about Clark that if anybody that 6'5" or less was guarding him, and he was going from left to right, to his right, and trying to attack the rim, there is nobody. I defied to say nobody that would stop him, or not get fouled, or he would get fouled doing it. So anyway, what I wanted to say was that he came in under the rim a couple of times, and he was going to get hammered, man, and he did get hammered, but he made the shots. So anyway, and I want to say another thing about it. Everybody's saying that there's no three-point shooters on this team. He is a three-point shooter on this team. He is the guy that if I was you know, Rozier, okay, in the last, if he is open in the last, you know, whatever a portion of the shot clock is, I'm getting it to him. Okay, so and so I want to tell you too, man. The boy's got some swag, man. The boy's got some swag. You know, he after he hit that 1 3-pointer, man, he was like, "Yeah, man." He's giving me some Seth Curry there, man. You know, go to sleep. So anyway, I just want to say that.
Yeah. I'm ready to run through a wall for Rudy, and this is great, buddy. I'm gonna eat, despite the Sacramento Kings hat, you got me all pumped up. Yeah, a lot to like. Nick, if there's anything left on the bone, you go ahead and bite it.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to the team for making free throws when they mattered, especially Jay Sean. I mean, some of the most unlikely guys to make the free throws in the clutch. Eli and Jay Sean being two of them, and I mean Dixon. At the end of last year, he made a lot of clutch free throws. His free throw percentage wasn't necessarily the best, but it really does feel like he can come in when it matters most. Just incredible seeing his blocks. I was getting a little worried for Jay Sean getting battered at the end of the game, especially actually the play that Dixon blocked it to save the game. I think he came up a little bloodied afterwards. The last thing I want to mention is I think Coach Joyce is playing the injuries really well. It seems like he really cares about the players' longevity when I mean, DeMichael, I know he's itching to come back, and he's supposed to come back soon. He's been kept off for a while. Netchis, they're being conservative with him.
Plantar wasn't it? Plantar fasciitis?
Yeah,
that's what he's.
Yeah, it's been
no. Zach, do you have any insight that you're able to share about DeMichael and his injury?
Foot.
So we got foot. Okay.
Yeah, plantar fasciitis. I read it in the Trib Live.
Oh, okay.
Lower extremity. We're using
you sound like the old Cubs manager when Jung Ho Gong got taken out, and he was like, I think he had plantar fasciitis, or who's that guy with the glasses?
Yeah, that was Madden.
Joe Madden.
That's right. Well, Nick, so I want to just dive into the box score real quick. We only have the one men's game to really talk about, but I'm going to dive into the box score real quick and then kick it back over to Zach for his thoughts on some of the numbers. First of all, St. Joe's came into the season as the preseason number 3 pick to win the conference, including 5 first-place votes. Loyola Chicago had 2 first-place votes to win the conference in the preseason poll. They ended up 5th in that poll. St. Joe's just pounded Loyola Chicago after the close loss to Duquesne. So yesterday, January 11th, we record this on Sunday nights usually. So it's Sunday, January 12th at the time of this recording. On Saturday afternoon, St. Joe's pounded Loyola Chicago 93-57. St. Joe's, they think VCU is the cream of the crop in the conference, but and then Dayton is always going to be there. But St. Joe's is a very, very impressive team with a chance to win the whole thing, I think. And so it's a big win for a number of reasons. So here's a dive into the box score as promised. Dinkins led all players with 26 points. And then the next leading scorer for the Dukes anyway was 17 from Dixon. Now 17 came in only 25 minutes because he is coming off the bench, which, as Zach reported, was David Dixon's. That was his call, not his call, but his idea almost to go to the coaching staff with that. He was 7 of 11 from the field. Was Dixon? It helps when you're a big, obviously playing underneath. 2 of 3 from 3-pointer. Jashawn Corbett was cold. He was 0 for 8 from the field. He did play 39 minutes, though, and he made 3 free throws, including 2 huge ones, one on kind of a lucky bounce, but we'll take it late in the game to give Duquesne a chance to win. But he did have 9 rebounds and 5 assists.
I want to say something, dude. He didn't score, but he was constantly going to the basket,
yes,
constantly pushing to action, and that is what you need. He is, how many assists did he have?
He had 5.
Yeah,
and no turnovers.
Right. So, so he doesn't have to get points. It's his aggression, going to the hoop, and I have to say, on the previous game where he got to 29, okay, those were not cheapies. Okay, I know he had some 3-pointers, but they were like going to the basket in mid-range territory and in the paint. Okay, and he was attacking the rim, constantly going, and that's what we need. We don't have anybody like that that constantly attacks the rim, and that's what we need him to do.
My last note from the box score, then I'll get Zach's thoughts, is Matus Wronski was 1 for 9, including 0 for 5 from 3. So he was also cold, and that was in 21 minutes. Max Edwards ended up getting 7 minutes. He was 2 for 2, including the 3-pointer for 5 points. And then, as we heard, maybe not excited about coming out of the game. So looking a little closer at those numbers, Mr. Weiss, your thoughts on the lineup, the rotation, and how players are making up for other players maybe having shortcomings sometimes.
Well, you missed the Corbett had 9 rebounds. I mean, that's 20 points right there. I mean, you look at it that way, the difference. There was so much talk in the press conference about, oh, well, Trey Dinkins and Jashawn Corbett flip-flopped. No, they didn't. It was just one was more hot, and it seemed like the body language from Trey Dinkins in the last game was a little bit negative, but he came back and he bounced back, which really shows more towards the perseverance of him. Cam Crawford, 13 points. I mean, that's what you're expecting from this kid. I think the biggest miss early season was Drew Joyce really not putting him in the rotation in any ways. I mean, there's a lot of similarities to what he does to what Jakob does, just with his length. He's improved as a defender, and he's shown an ability to be shot ready on the catch, which this team doesn't need tentative, and he's very aggressive when he needs to be, but he also knows when the right time is to defer, and that's something that you can't really coach. You look at, obviously, Jakob's 13 minutes are a killer. Obviously, I'll be at practice on Monday, so hopefully find out what his status would be come this week, of course, because of course, big games coming up. Every game's a big game at this point. Kareem, the 7-0, I mean, that was the only question that I asked Drew Joyce at the press conference was about Kareem's decision-making. And it's not just his decision-making, but here's a guy that lost his starting spot. It could have easily been, oh, here we go again. Keith Dambrot talked to me and I lost my spot. Now Drew did it, but much earlier. He's clearly not being forgotten. He plays 33 minutes, which says a lot about a guy coming off of the bench, and he's not making mistakes. He's more aggressive with calling his own number, but he knows when to defer. And that's what's going to keep you on the court for extended minutes, is the ability to make those decisions under duress at any point in the game. It's huge. And when you have your leader, who's literally been a leader since the first day he stepped on campus, when you have guys like Grant, when you have guys like Clark, when you have guys like Trey Williams, who has been on the team at that point for an extended period of time, and this is the guy that's leading the team, it just shows that it is the right guy that is leading the team. So very important there. Eli played 5 minutes, but it was 5 very important minutes. He makes the 2 shots, he makes the 2 free throws, and it was an interesting exchange. Drew Joyce says after the game, you guys play, in case there's a missed shot. And Eli said, don't worry, I'm going to knock these 2 free throws down. And that iced the game at that point, because let's face it, the Harlem Globetrotters aren't putting a 4-point line at the end of an overtime game. So the lead was very, very safe at that point. So obviously I already touched on Wronski. 21 minutes, I think, is encouraging. I think with Netchus losing some time because of the injury, I think they played Matoush a little bit longer than maybe they would have wanted to. But give him credit. Yes, the shots weren't falling, but again, it's not all about the shots falling. I look at the fact that in 21 minutes he had 0 fouls. So clearly defensively, he's not costing the team the game. He's playing straight up. He's making good decisions. So I think that that's something to be said as well, because it's not just about, oh, you're not making your shot. It's the Clint Hurdle, so what, now what mentality. So what, I'm not making shots. So I can affect the ball defensively and I can control that. And again, a lot of those shots were because the coaches were encouraging him to do that, because sometimes he maybe feels complimentary. So the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to take my shot because the coaches trust me to take this shot because I can make it and I've seen myself make it, that will play at any point in any time. It's important, and the team will say, even after 1 for 9, keep shooting. So I think everybody fulfilled their role, and not to be outdone, Shabi Barre playing 12 minutes as well. Yeah, he had 2 points to show for it, but he's making smarter choices, and the fouls will dip a little bit as play continues, but I mean, he still had a couple really, really big blocks, including one where he iced off the screen and made a big block off of a drive and a run that St. Joe's had. So everybody played their role. You can't really get on anybody for a bad game, so to say. So I think it was really, really encouraging. And I also think this week off was incredibly important because you can maybe get Netchus healthier, and who knows if DeMichael is or isn't going to play, but a week of no games can certainly help get that inch a little bit closer to the 1 yard line there.
Zach, have you heard any word about the possibility of DeMichael getting a red shirt for this season?
No.
They don't
He's
call
not.
him this?
There's no. They wouldn't expect a red shirt. I mean, you've had guys that have been on the sidelines injured. Of course, Alex Williams is now on the had a surgery, so we know that. We know Brandon Hall's done for the season, so we know those things are pretty lock stock. But I mean, it's when am I coming back? I don't know, and it's not just coach speak. It's not just medical speak. I mean, I think it's touch and go. I mean, he's a kid that a couple weeks kind of into the official practice gets injured. You see what he did during the Cayman Islands. He was starting to figure it out, and then it acted up again. It's on and off, and you don't want to rush it back just because for the sake of rushing back. But I also caution when the time does come, it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get those game reps in game shape. You saw it during the season. It took a little bit for the Cayman Islands, but it also seemed like he was running out of gas a little bit in that last game before things kind of came to a head. So I would say let's not overreact. Let's not underreact. Let's just take it as it comes, day by day, game by game. And whatever he gives at this point, I think is really a strike extra. And with him and Netchus, when things get healthy, I think this team is going to be very, very formidable come March. It doesn't have the stars that it has, but it doesn't need to have the stars that it had either. Everybody, to kind of quote WWF wrestler The Rock, you know your role. Everybody knows their role. And that ball's humming. The smiles are flowing, the confidence is building, and really, really the fact that they're doing it earlier than they did last year is very, very encouraging for this team. And it's also a credit to the staff. I mean, Drew Joyce, I think early was trying to figure out his guys, and I think he was trying to figure out himself too. And it seems like a lot of those questions are being answered. And the fact that it still doesn't seem like they've played their best basketball, but they're coming up with these efforts is really, really encouraging.
Okay, Red and Blue crew, we need the Rock Big Head at the next game, and the new mantra for this team, know your role. Before I preview the upcoming schedule for the men's team, and then we're going to get to the women, Nick Frost, will you please tie a bow on this win and the season so far for us before we close out this game?
Absolutely. I agree, Bob, that St. Joe's is a top of the A10 contender here, especially based off talent. Going into this game, I don't think we were necessarily the most talented team, but we did everything as well as we possibly could have to bring this win home. I am really encouraged that we held Eric Reynolds in check. He dominated us last year, and so seeing that we can play different styles of defense to make sure that we're stopping key figures on the other team is really encouraging, especially when it ends in a victory. This is probably the most encouraging I've been going into A10 tournament, likely running the table again like we did last year. If we can beat St. Joe's, I think we can beat just about anybody in this conference.
So kudos to Drew Joyce. They were 0-6 at one point, and they earned the 0-6, but they've also since then they're 7-3. So kudos to them. The Dukes stand at 7-9 overall, 2-1 in the conference. They have not won a conference road game yet. Right. So that remains to be seen how this team will carry this type of formula on the road. The only road conference game they've played is the one at Davidson. They lost 77-71 back on January 4th, and we recapped that one in last week's show. So coming off the St. Joe's win, the Dukes have another week until they play again. So it'll be January 15th at
DW,
George
right?
Washington. That is, a few days from now, but a week since they last played, of course. So January 15th, 7 p.m. It's a Wednesday night at DC. The Dukes will play the Revolutionaries, and then they will come home for a UPMC Redout against St. Bonaventure. So the Bonnies come down from Olean, New York. They make the short trip, and they travel well. So Dukes fans, show up. Wear red. Saturday, the 18th at 2 p.m. That's at the Cooper Fieldhouse in another A10 game. All right, let's move over to the women's basketball team, and a lot to like there. Oh, before I do that, guys, I'm so sorry. We wanted to do something that, and we'll have to try to make this kind of quick because we spent a lot of time, deservedly so, on the last Duquesne game. We wanted to try to rank this team's hierarchy a little bit. I'm going to give you my top, let's say, 5 or 6 players on the team. So if you bear with me, I'll grab my notes. So to me, and it's tough to say when you say hierarchy, we kind of knew last year, right? Day Grant was the go-to guy. He was the star, and then Jimmy Clark was right there with him. For me, so far this season, I do think that this team is, led by, as much as they're going to come and go, I think, with the leadership of Kareem Rozier. I think you really win with guys like Rozier. He's not their best player. So I'm not saying he's the top of the hierarchy, but he's going to make my list because Kareem is the kind of guy you win with. Dave Dixon is the kind of guy you win with. And actually, it's been proven. They've been, winning the last couple seasons with these guys ever since Kareem arrived on campus. But to me, my top player is Jashawn Corbett so far this season. I think Corbett is their top player. He's averaging 10.5 a game. The leading scorer is Trey Dinkins with 11.3 a game. But I like Corbett and then Dinkins. And then from there, I'm going to go Kareem Rozier for what he's doing, handling the ball and not turning it over. I'm going to go Dave Dixon. And then I still like Jake DeMichael as my 5th best player on the team. When he comes back, it's going to make a huge difference. He's played 7 games. He had no starts. That was a big point of contention for Dukes fans early when they were struggling, that he wasn't getting starts. But in 7 games off the bench, he averaged 10.9 a game. And he was only getting, if I can grab the minutes played per game, he was averaging just around 24.5 minutes and was getting that kind of scoring. And my 6th guy on the team is going to be Netchis, Jakob Netchis. 7th, I'll say Matus Ronsky, and I think that's kind of deep enough. I'm going to go to Nick Frost for your hierarchy, and then I'll try out Rudy. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So if we're going most valuable scorer, like Day's role was last year, it's definitely Dinkins in my mind. I put in my notes, I think Jashawn Corbett's probably going to be the consensus number 1 pick. The coaches think that, obviously. He's definitely got the most minutes played this year. And especially with Netchis going in and out, being healthy, his role as that stretch 4 is even more important. So I understand him being a number 1 player. I did want to give the shine to my guy, Cam Crawford. I will say in the offseason, Zach talked me into Cam Crawford. I was higher on Max Edwards, and then when we saw the players play, Cam Crawford, I think, is the most valuable player to the success this season. Going into the season, I would have probably been picking DeMichael or Netchis, but we've kind of had success with both of those guys out in spurts here. So while they are super valuable, I think I have to give Jashawn Corbett and Cam Crawford as the top 2. Rozier I have as almost an extension of a coach on the team with how he leads. So even if he's maybe out for injury for any period of time, I kind of did it based off that. How can I see this team moving forward if a guy's injured? And if Kareem's injured, he still provides all that same leadership. He just doesn't provide the assist to turnover ratio and key defensive plays that he usually makes, despite being undersized. And then that was also why I couldn't pick really Dixon, Barre, or Eli as one of the top three, because all three have played really well. So there's not as big of a drop off between one to the next guy, where I think if you lose Cam Crawford or Jay-Sean Corbett, there's going to be a much bigger drop off when it comes to the quality of minutes that we fill those guys in with.
Sorry, fair enough. Rudy, give us your hierarchy abridged.
Well, abridged. well, you know how I feel about Nexus. I'd say he's about the second most important. First most important is Rozier. You know, people are gonna probably say why, because well, the reason is that when he has a good game, we win.
Yeah.
When he has a bad game, we lose. That is a very good indication. And I could point to every one of the losing streak. He was not playing well at the beginning of the season, and he was inefficient, not turning the ball over. And I don't know if you've noticed, but on Facebook I read that he is number one right now in the league turnover to
yeah, we mentioned it at
assist
the
ratio.
start. Yeah, he's third in the country,
and ninth or eighth in the country.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, I might be giving him too high.
Eighth or ninth,
yeah.
or so. Okay. Anyway, so that to me it shows that he doesn't care. All he cares about is winning, man. And so that's he doesn't care if he has to come off the bench to do it. He doesn't care if he's called the starter. You know, it doesn't matter to him. And then I gotta say Dixon. Okay, third, and then fourth. You got to get Crawford and well. I say you gotta have Corbett in there for four, and then five, then Dinkins as your come off the bench assassin, and yeah. So that's what I would say.
Zach, how's our aim?
I would say that if you're looking towards the top tier, it goes back to the lineup decisions and when the lineup got changed, and the two gentlemen that were added to the lineup were Netchus and were Crawford. And those two added length, those two with Crawford really adding dedication to defensive integrity, I think really set the whole thing off. I think Corbett has been the most consistent Duquesne player the entire year throughout the ebbs and flows, and I think there's absolutely a place for that. I think that Rozier's response, it goes back to what I said earlier. It isn't about necessarily the play, which it is, but it's also about the response to losing his starting spot and understanding that, as Rudy said, it's like that Al Davis mentality. Just win, baby. That's all that it comes down to. Is the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you played 0 minutes or if you played all 40 minutes. It matters at the end of the day what you contributed either on or off the court to winning. And that's why Dave Dixon would also potentially make a list like that too. He's, again, has not had a full off season where he has had a chance to condition his body because there has always been an injury of some kind. I profiled it in 7 years. There you go. There's a plug for us there, Bob. But it's one of those things
book. Yeah,
where,
right.
yeah, of course, I had to plug it, where Dave got injured last season before the season started. And then he was injured during A10 play too. He had to jump off his other knee just because he was so banged up, and it extended. So he didn't have a full off season again. And now you're finally starting to see him get his legs under him. And you see how much of a difference it is. He's the best post that Duquesne has had in terms of electricity. Corbett's probably been the best post from a consistency perspective. And he's also figured out, Chicago State, in Corbett. He was the guy that had to figure, it all out and do it all there. And he understands now that he's a part of a winning program, I don't have to do everything and I don't have to obsess over everything. And, for your mind, the rest will follow. So there's a lot to say about that too. I think value just comes from it there. I don't. DeMichael's a tricky one. His value is very, very clear, but his value also came when the team hadn't figured out what its identity was yet. So it almost feels like that's an incomplete, and that's not a slight on Jake, and more of a slight on the team and where it wasn't at that point in time. From uh, an X's and O's, a schematic, and arguably from a maturity standpoint. The team just didn't know who they were yet, and they weren't in the positions to put each other to succeed in the time that it is now. Those player only meetings that really drove this thing last year, well, they're back. And so is Doc Carr. And Doc Carr was a big Keith Dambrot disciple. And the guy, he was there when things started to turn around. And he sat there silently, but actions speak louder than words. And the guys believe, the coaches believe, and there's a lot to be said. So some of those guys are probably going to be on your short list. There's guys that have had ebbs and flows, both positively and negatively. But if you're looking at a list without any numerics, I mean, those are probably 5 or 6 that would jump off the page for a myriad of reasons in one way or the other.
All right, guys, in the interest of trying to keep our show, around an hour or less, I got to move on to the women's basketball program, but really great points, solid all around. Thank you all very much. So as far as the ladies team, Duquesne women had a bit of a rough spell to open up, a very rough spell to open up Atlantic 10 play. Very promising non-conference part of the schedule for the Duquesne Dukes women's team. But in their first 3 games in conference play, the Dukes lost all 3, 76-70 at home against Davidson in a very disappointing game. Lost at VCU in a tight one, 65-63. Lost another tight one, another home game too, 64-62 to Fordham. But very nicely have rebounded, 67-64 win at St. Joe's on Wednesday, the 8th. And then yesterday, in a game at George Washington, the Dukes won big, 97-55 against the Revolutionaries. A quick peek into the most recent box score, the 97-55 win over George Washington. You think you score 97 points, guys, and Megan McConnell, who we all agree is going to be at the top of our hierarchy for the women's team, she must have had a quadruple double if you're going to win by that much. But Megan held to just 5 points. She struggled, 2 of 11 from the field, including 1 of 7 from 3, and she missed her only 2 free throws. A very uncharacteristic game from Megan. She did have 6 boards, 6 assists, and 5 steals, so she didn't disappear altogether. But the Dukes instead were led by 20 points from Mackenzie Blackford. Those 20 points led all players. And then there were 17 points from Keandra Brown, 13 each from Nadia Moore and Journey Kiaku. A great team effort. The Duquesne Dukes ladies are now, their record stands at, 11-5 overall, and now 2-3 in the conference. I want to start with Nick. Nick pays very close attention to the ladies program, having been a part of it in the past. And Nick, your thoughts on this nice resurgence out of the ladies?
Yeah, I think the St. Joe's win for the women's team is arguably even more impressive than the men's win against St. Joe's. The women's team is again supposed to be a top of the A10 standings this year, and they played a defense that really stifled the St. Joe's 2 stars. So it'll be interesting to see whether other teams kind of copy that moving forward or not, and whether we'll be able to use that just as effectively the next time around. I'm sure there'll be adjustments. There were changes to the starting rotation that I'm sure Zach will touch on more. And I did want to point out, just to make this concise, they had a great end of half play call where Meg was able to pass and led to another buzzer beater there. So there was some adjustments from the losses in improvement. I'll say that. A great win against St. Joe's. Gabby Hutcherson and Keandra Brown both coming up big with 3s in that game. And then GW, kind of utter domination. Whenever it's that big of a victory, I don't really feel the need to add too much more when it comes to analysis.
Now, in that St. Joe's game, Nick, Megan was, like she normally is, 19 points, 8 boards, 5 assists, 6 steals, 2 blocks. So she was everywhere. I want to go to Zach for his thoughts on the ladies, especially these lineup changes that Dan Burt hinted at that were necessary after the 0-3 start to conference play. Zach, how has Coach Burt and the women's team been able to unravel their mystery and start winning again?
Well, let's go back to a week ago. And what happened a week ago was 100% unacceptable. The last offensive play call of that last loss was just unacceptable in every single way, to the point that I shared it with you, Bob, and I shared it with you, Slick Nick. It was just absolutely just not winning basketball, and it's winning time, and there was no support that was being given. But what was
Zach, if I
worse than
may, sorry to interrupt you. Before you go into details on this, just so our listeners understand, this is the 64-62 loss at home against Fordham when Duquesne had the ball with a chance to win at the end, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And I did relay my concerns to the coaching staff, because it was a play that if I were a fan, I would have been, and if I was a player, I would not want to take ownership of. But worse than that, and worse than the actions of not helping Meg McConnell up in a hurry afterwards, the post-game comments on ESPN Plus were not in the greatest of taste. Obviously, emotions were running very high. So, understandably, that's a very, very difficult locker room at that point in time. And there's two options: you can fight or you can flight. And that practice right after was going to be extremely important. How was it going to be relayed? Did anything have to be said? And how was the team going to respond against a St. Joseph's team, which was preseason the best team in the conference? I would have voted them first if I had a vote. Just the big three that they have, Ziegler, Mackenzie Smith, and Talia Brugler, are three of the best players in the Atlantic 10 Conference, bar none. Those are top tier first team and second team players in some kind of shape or form. And the team was calm, and the defense that Nick is referring to, it was very clear. If you watch the game, it was very clear. They just really kept things very, very tight, and they let one player kind of have free roam, and they didn't know what to do. And you could see it. And give a game ball to Raina Green. The way that she defended Talia Brugler, 7 points on 3 of 7 shooting, but just that was a team that was so incredibly frustrated. And we talked about the men and what happened last year. The men went to George Mason. They got a big win. They could have gone home. They stayed on the road, and then they had their best effort of the season against VCU. Women's basketball team went on the road to St. Joe's. They could have went home. They didn't. They went to Foggy Bottom for the extra day, and they whooped GW, and it was possibly their best showing of the season. I'm not saying the end result is going to be the same, but what I am saying is that those behaviors were huge, and to not go home and to be on the road together, force themselves to bond, was important. I think you saw some of that frustration play out against St. Joe's. There were times where there was some miscommunication and some bad body language, but they figured it out together. They won that game together, and they hadn't won at St. Joe's since 2020. So it's been a while. Wins at Hawk Hill are very, very challenging for this team to come by. That is a huge momentum win. And it's not just that 1-3 on paper sounds better than 0-4. It was those Keith Dambrot EGBs. It was the way that they did it, the way that they locked in, were so rock solid on the game plan, and figured out a way. The George Washington game, I think at that point, was just gravy. It was an extension. GW as a team is not in the best state right now, and just Duquesne caught them at a very, very bad time for them, but a good time for Duquesne. I mean, the start of the game itself said that. And when you hold a team to under 20 points at halftime and you make 19 threes, which was one off of a program record, I mean, just it's raining threes. It was just ridiculous to see. And just some of those defensive efforts. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Faith Walker, because the role that she has is a very, very thankless one. Her job is not necessarily to put the ball in the net, but it's to use her length to really pressure out of bounds plays, to really provide defensive pressure in her minutes, and to make winning plays, and to do that as a freshman that, the start of the season, I think there were a lot of nerves there. For any freshman, there's a lot of nerves. And she's really found a home on that court, and she's really, really found peace on the court. And it's really, really fun to watch that play on the court. Of course, players like Mackenzie Blackford as a freshman, who has made some really, really great shots for this team, but also is a very, very good defender. And I think that's lost too. They have some really, really good freshmen, and the way that they play, where everybody gets a chance to play, as a freshman, that's just a green light, that where a lot of the pressure's taken off. Nadia Moore's capitalized so many times, and it's not just her shot, but it's her ability to follow up a shot, and it's her ability. And when she becomes an even better defender, she's going to be one of the best players in the Atlantic 10, and there's no doubt in my mind on that. And of course, Journey Kyaku is Journey Kyaku, and just the way that she's really taken so many steps forward this year. But there's so many players that are coming together at the right time, and this team has really started to figure it out. And now that they've had those two momentum plays, those momentum games on the road, now they're back home, and now they're at peace. And it was important for them to go on the road to find themselves again. But now they found themselves, and now a lot of other teams are really, really in trouble.
Zach, BGB, big girl basketball, is that what that would stand for?
EGBs, the Keith Dambrot energy generated behaviors.
Okay. Thanks.
Where
Okay.
did you get that, Bob?
I thought I heard
Jeez.
BGB. I'm trying the whole time you're talking. I'm like, what could that be? Before I go to Rudy, because you mentioned ESPN Plus, Zach, and Rudy has been very impressed by the production value there. I want to give him a chance to talk about that, but being the video guy that he is. But I want to mention St. Joe's was second, in the preseason conference poll, 4 out of a possible 15 first place votes they got behind Richmond. Of course, was the preseason favorite, deservedly so. But yeah, kudos to the ladies on a couple big wins to turn their season around, perhaps. The Duquesne women's team next plays on Wednesday, January 15th at 6 p.m. This is at home. This is a UPMC pink out. Okay, 6 p.m. It's a UPMC pink out at the Coop against Dayton, 6 p.m. on the 15th. And then the ladies stay home for an alumni game. I guess it's the alumnae would be plural, female plural. Alumnae game on January 19th. That's a Sunday at noon against Rhode Island. Rudy, you mentioned to me prior to this week's show that you were pretty impressed with the ESPN Plus broadcasts that Duquesne Athletics is putting out.
Well, obviously, I've been a connoisseur of sorts of both video, because that's what I do for a living, and of course the message board and so on and so forth. And I was an early proponent of highlighting YouTube videos of clips from basketball players and their highlight reels and stuff like that. So, I'm going way back, and also, I'm going way back to when, I got the live streaming. Okay. I don't know how many people back then, the first few years, that were aware. I mean, it was really bad, just really super bad. And in fact, at one time I had to call at halftime to Duquesne from where I was in California and say, guys, you're showing black. You're not even showing anything, which is a sin in television broadcasts when you go black. Okay. So anyway, and of course now ESPN has picked up the mantle, because they've seen, like any other college that's out there now that is being on ESPN. If you go see, we're obviously not the only ones on there. Like, everybody's on there. So the thing is that they picked it up. I guess really I started seeing the last 3 or 4 years, right? So I got to give a shout out to the the announcers, which are Rachel Zimmerman for the basketball women's, Alexander Permios.
Oh, that's my guy, Alex
assassinated then. Yes. And then for the men's, Ellis Cannon and Tim Benz. So I have to say that also, until this year, they showed like nothing but the game, right? And I'm a big proponent, because that's what I specialize in: multi-camera shoots, 3 or 4 cameras at the same time shooting a live event. And I always had, in this case, they should have a camera in the crowd, showing the crowd. We're the ones paying for the goddamn games. Okay.
It's gonna be okay,
So
Rudy.
show show the people in the background and
Yeah.
when people are cheering and stuff. So anyway, so that's my pet peeve. And
Yeah, no, it's been nice. I agree with you. They're quality. So the assistant athletic director for live event production is Nick Apria, if I'm saying his name right. So
yeah,
kudos to Nick. Also it's an extension of external relations under Megan Jarling. So Nick Apria is in that department. Leah Adams and Ryan Landry are in charge of marketing and fan engagement. Kimber Shentwu, if I'm saying the name correct, is the creative director. Josh Brunette is the assistant director for creative media and production. So all these folks have something to do with the production value, but Nick Apria, I would say first and foremost in charge of live event production. So shout out, kudos to those guys. All right, we got to move on to our women's hierarchy. We'll try to make this very quick because we are running kind of long.
well, you never asked me about the Duquesne women for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you do it, Rudy, as part of your hierarchy. Okay, so you're actually gonna go first. Now, other than Megan, who else do you like in order?
Well, I wasn't privy. I didn't read the script. So, obviously you got to put McConnell number one. I like Kiako and Brown and Hutchinson and who else? What was her name? And Blackford. I mean, she's been coming through the last couple of games. And I think that's the major change that you were talking about, that he's going to notice that McConnell only played 28 minutes. So,
well, last game,
so
I
maybe,
think she came out to get a rest because they were blowing the team out. I would probably
right.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that I think he wants to give some minutes to some other girls too, I think. And that's about it. I don't know. I'm not too familiar. Maytek is also someone because she's a scorer. So yeah, those are the girls that I would mention.
So I obviously Megan and Journey, they're my top two in that order. They give me, Day Day and Jimmy vibes. So Megan and Journey. For me, Keandra Brown is their third best player right now. Really big fan of what Keandra's doing up both ends of the court. Gabby Hutcherson, and I swear I'm not just reading through the leading scorers in that order. And I also am a fan of Angela Matic and Mackenzie Blackford, and I'll finish up with Nadia Moore. I think she's kind of underrated on this team, sort of flying under the radar. We'll do Zach and then Nick.
I mean, I can hierarchy the top two. I think that's
that's right.
fairly,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't want to have to put you on the spot like that. I'm sorry.
That's fairly safe. The top two, RJ Bell and Rick Bell. Anyways, we'll go to no. In all seriousness, I mean one and two are fairly similar. I think Nadia's not getting enough shine for what she's been able to do. I think if she can keep two hands off defensively, then I think she's a complete player because that would keep her on the court much, much longer. And I think that helps. In terms of growth that Key Brown has shown has probably been the most dramatic. Really didn't have a chance to show it last season. And just you really see it coming together. She really put the work in this off season to make things work, and it showed. And obviously what Mac Blackford has done, they were really high on her among all of the freshmen going into the season, which is incredibly important. But again, it's so hard to ignore what Raina Green, who is really known for her defense coming in, she spent the second semester as a gray shirt where she really had an opportunity to learn and see what made this team go. And then in a sense, it was a sneak peek, but it really wasn't because Dan Burt changed the play style that they were doing, and it fits her really, really well. And it also fits Faith Walker well in her role. And I also think that it fits Rami Queta a lot better this year too, where she didn't really get a chance to show what she can do. And she's shown some really good flashes. I still remember a practice early in the season after the opening win against Princeton. And of course, the players have the autonomy to tell Dan when he talks too much in the huddle during these practices. But before they cut him off, and I said this story to Nick, I shared it with him. He said, Rami, you had a hell of a game in that first game. And so the confidence that she's had the opportunity to play with just by getting the chance to play, She presses really well. She's really athletic. This was really what they saw going into last season, and it just didn't get an opportunity to play out on the court. So, by virtue of this system, somebody like Ramey, who, yes, will get some steals, will get some points, but what she's able to do with and showcase her all around game, while it's not always seen on the box score, much like with Faith Walker, it's not always shown in the box score. It is needed to make this engine go, and that is so incredibly important. So, I think that those three in particular, Raina, Faith, and Ramey, really deserve some kudos because they're not being looked at enough for what they're doing to make this team succeed.
So for our listeners, when Zach says gray shirt, he's referring to athletes who come to the university prior than really joining the sports team itself. You see it a lot more often in football, but it gives you a chance to be around the team, practice with the team, but not actually start, eligibility with the team. So that's interesting to hear that element there. Thank you, Zach. Nick, again, try to be as quick as you can because we're running short on time, but give us your hierarchy with the women's team. We probably all agree it's a 1-2 McConnell Kyaku.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And then Keandra is a pretty safe 3 this year with how she's developed. I did want to give another shout out to Nadia Moore, who really, I think, has the highest upside of the freshman class. I know Blackford's putting in the buckets, but as Zach said, she has the potential to be a very complete player. And I love the intensity and hustle that she brings every second that she's out there. So I did want to add her to the list, or just kind of bring her back up. The future's bright. We're talking about all these big contributors. A lot of them are young. So the guards are going to be well in place after Meg graduates after this year. And I was a little worried going into this year about that.
Gabby Hutcherson, by the way, someone who's not young, right? A graduate student. I got to point out 18 blocks from Gabby Hutcherson. We talk about on the men's side what Dave Dixon's doing on defense, but yeah, Gabby Hutcherson, 18 blocks is really impressive. Dixon, and I'm just actually jumping over, he has 25 to give you some sort of sense. But 18 blocks is nothing to turn your nose up at. So some big football news, guys. There's no quarterback yet. So it looks like the unless somebody comes in, for the spring to enroll at Duquesne. I beg your pardon, this spring semester has started, right? So if somebody were to come in now and transfer in, they'd have a spring with the team and then maybe the starter in the fall on the football team. So it's looking like the solution to quarterback might be on the roster, because somebody to enter in the fall and then immediately become the starter, that's kind of tough to just do in camp. So quarterback's kind of still a question mark right now. We'll see how that goes. But the bigger news out of Duquesne football land is the return of the city game. Duquesne will open its 2025 season at Pitt at Acrisure Stadium, the home of the Steelers. That will be Pitt's opener as well. This will be the first time since 1939 that these teams have played. And by the way, although Pitt holds a 5-2 series lead, the Dukes won the last meeting. So the Dukes have bragging rights still. I just think it's awesome, guys. I'm speaking as a general alumnus of the school, not just as someone who played football at Duquesne. I just think it's really cool that Duquesne and Pitt will play a football game. It's a shame it's not happening in men's basketball, because I love the women's basketball city game. But I think it's cool that these teams are going to play this game. I was able to get some info from a friend of the show, we'll just say, who had some inside knowledge based on what he knows about how this game went down. And this friend of the show tells me that it was Pat Narduzzi who made this happen. And it was about 3 years ago that Narduzzi had heard that Duquesne and had interest in playing football against Pitt, but the athletic director at Pitt at the time was not interested in it. That it wasn't happening. However, Narduzzi asked to speak directly to Duquesne himself, and he made it happen. So kudos to Narduzzi. And now all of a sudden I'm a Narduzzi fan because I just think that's really great that happened. I'm also told that they will play Robert Morris possibly next year or the year after. Pitt will as well. So I think that's cool that it's happening on the gridiron. I wish it happened on the hardwood as well. But this is something that was Narduzzi driven. And I'm told also by this same contact that Jeff Capel is the one to blame for the men's basketball version not happening. that he's, this was an Arduzzi thing, and on the basketball side, it's a Capel thing. I want to go. I don't want to have Zac necessarily have to, give us anything that he's not comfortable yet publishing or talking about. But Zac, your thoughts on the city game and maybe the information I was able to get?
It's about damn time. I'm not surprised, but in the same vein, as much as Duquesne fans are up in arms about Pitt not having men's basketball, let's also point the finger at Duquesne for not having Robert Morris on the men's basketball schedule. It goes both ways, and on the women's side as well, until the coaching change happened this year too. I think it is extremely important to keep your local rivalries for so many reasons. It's great for the city, it's great for optics, it's great for recruiting, it's a win all the way around. And it doesn't even have to really be spoken. The fact that Narduzzi's the one that had to put this in, it's a shame that it came to that. And, it shows more about one side than it shows about the other side. As Nick knows, the Dan Burt line, anytime, any place, anywhere, that's kind of seems like the motto. And, it's nice that when you have so many of these big games and it's, oh, but they're in Hawaii. Oh, but they're here. Oh, but they're there. You don't really have to go that far for this one if you're living in the city. It doesn't get much better than that. And you have football where you can sleep in your own bed. You don't have to worry about too much of cost and logistics. And, there's a really good opportunity for a show out. And you had that opportunity at West Virginia the previous season. Of course, the weather had something to say about that for a lot of fans. But I mean, it's just nice to have that opportunity. And I'm also really excited for Alex Panormius that, it's him and Bill Hillgrove up in that press box together that day. So that's going to be extremely special, I think, for Alex, who we both agree is a future Duquesne Athletics Hall of Famer. So I think that there's a lot of excitement there. And again, it's great for the city. I mean, Duquesne, there's a lot to be said for what this team is going to look like. There's still a lot to figure out between now and when that kickoff happens, but that's for another time. For now, this is really exciting news in a time where it's kind of a dead period. So it's exciting to have some kind of news where everything now is, ooh, this is extra motivation for when they come to Pitt, and this is a good opportunity. So there's a lot to be said for that, and it gets the program buzzing, and it adds validity to the program in a sense as well. Just that feeling that you get a chance to play your so-called brother, your so-called rival, and have that opportunity. I can't tell you how many times during summer league basketball at Green Tree several years ago, Bob, that there would always be those showdowns between Pitt and Duquesne, and there was just that feeling. And just having that play out on a football field, regardless of a score, is going to be a win for both sides. And the fact that Narduzzi wants to do the same with Robert Morris just shows that he gets it. In a time when so many people are concerned about optics or losing to this team or losing to that team, Pat Narduzzi understands the importance. He's had the opportunity with Penn State. He's had the opportunity with West Virginia. And now he's giving himself the opportunity with Duquesne and Robert Morris. It says a lot about the values that he has for the game, for the city, and that he understands it, and that Jerry Schmidt's willing to play ball too. It's always been that mantra, and he has an opportunity too, and it's a great one for him. So just a win all the way around, and not surprised by any of what your source says, Bob. It totally checks out.
Thanks for mentioning Alex. He is pumped about it. Anybody who was a broadcaster with Alex, which I was for a season or two, Alex is going to have us get together for a photo op before the game. So as a way of commemorating this. Rudy, we're going to get you back to Pittsburgh for this game or what?
Yeah, I'll fly in as soon as possible.
Come on, man. It's going to fill up. Now, Nick, you're going to be at this game, right?
Hey, you
yeah,
gonna
the whole
put me up?
family.
Dude,
You can
put
stay with
up?
me, Rudy. Yeah, you can stay with, you know what? Actually, I got a pool in the back and a lake. Lake's better for you. Go ahead, Nick.
My wife's actually attending classes at Pitt while she works there, so it's a divided household for that game, but we'll have the entire group out there supporting. It's going to be cool. Is this replacing the Youngstown State game for Pitt? Or are they basically going to do a rotation, you think, between us, Robert Morris, and Youngstown?
So I'm told that Youngstown State remains a game that Duquesne is, I'm sure that Pitt is interested in playing, and a possibility that they could even play St. Francis. They want to play all the local teams, and I think that's really great. When Pitt went ahead and played Albany a couple years ago, I was like, come on, we're right here. play us, and I don't know if my old coach Greg Gattuso had something to do with it. I bet he did, having served at Pitt for a while as an assistant coach. But yeah, I'm told that that they will play Youngstown State again, despite this.
All right. Well, that's
I just
cool.
think it's great news. I think it's good for the city. It's good for local sports. And Zach was saying, some of these players played against each other in high school. They know each other, even though they're two different levels of competition. All right. So our last item we're going to talk about, we want to highlight one of the non-revenue sports at the university, one of the Olympic sports, if you will. Duquesne Triathlon has wrapped up its fall season, and this was their, if I'm not mistaken, Zach, this was the first season for triathlon, right? They didn't start in the last school year, right? This fall was their first season of competition. Oh, it was their second. Thank you, buddy. So this is when Duquesne added a number of women's sports a couple years ago. This was one of those new sports, and triathlon is not an NCAA championship sport, much like the acrobatics and tumbling that we highlighted on our last episode. This is an emerging sport. Triathlon is. So Duquesne's sponsorship of a varsity triathlon team is not one that could result in an NCAA championship, just like with acro and tumbling. Triathlon is governed by USA Triathlon, and Duquesne falls in that hierarchy or that governance. In this fall semester, the Duquesne Dukes finished ninth at the national championship meet. This was back in November. The Dukes finished it's ninth behind schools like Arizona State, but there's also Queens University of Charlotte is in there, East Tennessee State, Denver. It's not one of those sports where you have to play all Division I schools like Duquesne normally is. So it's very similar in terms of how there's a championship and not an NCAA championship. Right now, there are 37 schools that sponsor triathlon as a varsity sport. 12 of them are Division I like Duquesne, 14 are D2, and 11 are D3. Triathlon works like this. There are sprint distances, or there are super sprint distances. And there are structures where there's duels, DUAL, where you can play against another school, or there's a triangular meet or a quad meet. Competitions can take place outdoors. They can take place indoors, or in some sort of hybrid setting. You can also have competitions that are swim, run, or run, swim, or bike, run, or run, bike, instead of doing all three, which of course is where the name triathlon comes from. In the championship, which Duquesne finished ninth in, that is run by if I have this correct, the Women's Collegiate Triathlon National Championships, it's called. So it's not something that is, again, an NCAA championship sport just yet. But triathlon had a decent showing this fall in their, as Zach tells us, their second season of competition on the Bluff. They returned to action in the spring, March 1st through the 2nd, at the Claremont Draft Legal Challenge in Claremont, Florida. That is also, coincidentally, or maybe not, where the national championships were held in the fall in Claremont, Florida, down at Lake Louisa State Park. So, yeah, shout out to the triathlon team. We, as Dukes fans, don't know a lot about this sport just yet. They did have a home meet in September of the fall semester in Beaver Falls at Brady's Run Park. Duquesne hosted that in a Duquesne Invitational. So they are playing locally, so to speak, or competing locally if you want to get a chance to check them out. But the best source for it would be goduquesne.com. They won't be participating as it stands right now anywhere home in the spring. The one thing announced is the March event that's going to be down in Florida. So the head coach for the triathlon team, I want to make sure I mention her name is Joella Baker. She was a former multi-sport student athlete at Duquesne, if you recognize the name. She competed in cross-country, track, and swimming at Duquesne. So kind of a perfect, candidate to lead the Duquesne triathlon team one day. So I think that's kind of a cool story that Joella Baker returns to the Bluff to lead the triathlon team. So we'll tell you more about that team if and when there is breaking news or good things to talk about regarding Duquesne Triathlon. Until next time, for Rudy Longarini, for Nick Frost, and our guest, Zac Weiss, I am Bob Healy III. Thanks again for listening to All Duke Sports Talk. Can't wait to see what our teams are going to do in the next week, and can't wait to see you back here on YouTube to listen to us talk about it. Guys, Shoo, shoo, rah, rah. Go Dukes. Thanks as always.
Go Dukes!